So, Zechs here for theouthousers.com, and here's my review of Venom. Okay, I wanted to take a little chunk of water before I start going into this. So yeah, I went in this with an open mind, a really open mind on this movie because after so much negativity, I'm like, okay, maybe it can't be that bad. Maybe it can't be that bad. Especially hearing after someone compared this to the Catwoman of our generation, or this generation. That's wow. Uh, but this is another movie that's basically a mess. It's not a complete mess, but it's a mess nonetheless. You have basically the opening is just a ugh. That's the worst part of the movie, I could say. The first 30 minutes are just. I was starting to fall asleep. Honestly, I honestly was, because it was just so just agonizing, and just basically so many quick cuts, and you're like, wait, what? I thought, wait, isn't he? Wait, what? Huh? What? Huh? So yeah, okay. And then the whole subplot. There's a subplot too that was just totally what the hell. So okay, for all its criticisms I want to have on it, the movie's still fun. Uh, Tom Hardy is a great lead, and he does his job in this movie. I mean, he is pretty good, and so is the symbiote. Symbiote. I couldn't help it. But yeah, so Venom and Eddie, the symbiote, uh, they're pretty much the best part of this movie. That and surprisingly, Michelle Williams, because I kept on expecting, okay, this is Sony, so she's gonna be bait. She's gonna get kidnapped. Oh God, this is gonna be a whole MJ thing. And surprisingly, it wasn't. It was totally different. It was the other way around, of Eddie getting one kidnapped and her having to bust him out. So it was a nice, fun surprise seeing that. Uh, I mean, the acting is really good. It's good across the board. Just that the problem with the movie is you really there's a lot that feels like it was taken out of the movie. That you see this as Sony basically gutting this movie just so it can get PG-13. Because there are parts in this you're like, wait, what's going on here? How is this subplot with the symbiote with Riot making any sense? Like, how the hell is it going from one place to another, and then basically somehow it takes a plane? Wait, what? And then the fact that this little girl who's possessed by the symbiote somehow is able to get on the plane because reasons? Maybe? And then basically, the lead villain play that the repairist in Rogue One was pretty good, just that his character really has no motivation at all, just to be evil industrialist who can't be named Norman Osborn. I mean, he does a good job what he does. The problem is, you're thinking, okay, this is basically Norman Osborn. This is basically the freaking subplot from the Amazing Spider-Man movies, basically. And you're like, okay, really, Stoney, you haven't learned any new tricks lately. But I'll say this regard, I looked at this character, played by the actor from World One, and I just kept on thinking, okay, he's basically being like an Anton Arcane role of the Swamp Thing movies, which the original one with Wes Craven. And sure enough, same thing happened to him. Like basically, his character in this with Anton Arcane in that movie. And when I went with that approach, the movie wasn't that bad per se. Just that it's very hollow. This movie's like a very 90s movie, comic book movie. Like basically, it's scared to adapt the story and it's based on, and basically everything that it's based on in the 90s doesn't embrace the comic bookiness. Yeah, yes, this movie is causing brain damage. I think. Yes, I think this movie affected my brain. No, basically, the movie is a '90s comic book movie. Just it isn't. It's terrified to embrace the comic bookness, basically. Uh, you have parts when it does, and that's when this movie works the best. The times when Eddie and the symbiote are talking to each other, that's my favorite parts of this movie. And this movie does take a long time to establish Eddie Brock. And honestly, it works, but it doesn't work because you feel that there's parts missing in this movie because of that. And when Tom Hardy posted recently saying that there were 40 minutes cut, yeah, you can see that. Because this movie's a jumbled mess in the beginning, and that it takes a while for it to get going. But when it gets going, the parts it has, it's good. And like again, like the problems, like this movie's a mess. This movie is a complete utter mess. Like this was gutted just to get PG-13, but it's still a fun movie. I mean, I had fun with it. I mean, Tom Hardy, all the cast do the good job. Director has a good job of what scenes that are in the movie that are actually good. But this is just, oh, this is a cash grab movie. I could see why it gets hate because people are just realizing how much Sony wants to succeed, so they have a known little Spider-Man pocket universe of comic book movies. But this movie just feels like so 90s. It's basically Sony's like gutting the heart and soul of this movie, which obviously is an R-rated movie. I mean, you have the characters literally saying shit so much, and you have the violence, but you see quick cuts of it, and you're like, okay, but yeah, you can just see the problems this movie has. But the problems are, it ain't because of the movie itself; it's because of the studio, really. The movie's not bad. It's just, which when you think about it, like, wait, why is this having happened here and here and here? That's when the movie falls apart. It's heavily flawed because in that regard, but it's still a fun movie to watch. Like, this version of the movie, I recommend to watch in front of friends as a bad movie marathon type of movie because it's so bad, but it's still very much entertaining to watch. It's kind of, I mean, in regards, it's like comparing to Catwoman. Catwoman, I can't even watch like 2 minutes of. The Spirit, a better example. I can't watch 30 seconds of that movie and just turn it off. That movie's garbage. That's probably the worst superhero movie I've seen ever. Spirit. It's just, oh, it's so awful. But this is awful, but awful so bad it still has a heart to it, and it's still kind of fun. It's just the problem is that there's no real soul to it. That it just feels like it was taken from it and distributed and packaged as a PG-13 movie so it can get more money. Because that's basically what this movie is. This is Sony's attempt at that. Because like the second stringer, like there's 2 stringers at the end of the movie. The first one, okay, I can understand why this was attached to it. It's all the sequel baiting. But it's like there was no build up at all to it. There's like suddenly, bam, spoilers, Eddie Brock goes to a prison and meets a certain inmate. Surprise, surprise, who it is. But the second teaser is basically a teaser for Enter the Spider-Verse. And why? And in that regard, that's just Sony being Sony there. That's the worst part. So Enter the Spider-Verse looks amazing, but the problem is Sony's a shitty company. So you have this movie and that movie, and they seem like good movies. Just the problem is Sony ripped the heart out of this movie, basically. You see a husk, but you understand that there's something missing in this movie. You can have fun with it, but there is a flaw to this movie. But it's not the performances, it's not the direction. It's just that something was cut, and you could see the studio mishandling in this movie. So, should you see the movie in the theater? I'd say yes. I mean, seeing Tom Hardy as Venom was quite entertaining. I mean, it was. Everything basically was fun when Venom was on screen. I mean, sure, it was missing that white stripe spider symbol here, but with no Spider-Man in this movie. Well, there is a Jameson in this movie. Spoiler. But, yeah. Those who are pissed at Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice for killing off Jimmy Olsen in the first 10 minutes of that movie, I'm surprised there's no outrage for Jameson biting the dust in the first 10 minutes of this movie. Like, seriously, they kill off J. Jonah Jameson's son in the first few minutes of this movie, and okay. I mean, I understand why maybe it's a thing, but you literally have the first 10 minutes when the Life Foundation's searching their fallen wreck, and they had, oh, it's a survivor. Oh, it's Colonel Jameson. I'm like, wait, what? Is he gonna go man-wolf on us here? No, he doesn't go man-wolf on us here. Fortunately, he's just wasted, and more so than Jimmy Olsen in Batman vs Superman, because it's just a shout-out that really not wants nothing other than the symbiote possessing him, and basically starting off in this random subplot that takes the entire movie to get to, and then you're left questioning, well, why didn't the other symbionts try this? Why was this always like this? Like, how come they were like this, and like unlike Venom and Riot? So it's like, what? So yeah, this movie was a mess, but was a mess I hated? Not so much. This is a mess I still enjoyed for what it was. Ranking this, I would say, on superheroes of Sony movies, slightly better than the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and that's better than Spider-Man 3. That's it. Spider-Man 1 and 2 are still the better Sony movies, and I got a feeling Enter the Spider-Verse would be a better movie than this one. But I'm curious to see how the R-rated cut of this will be released. You know it's got to be released. This is Sony. They love money, so they will probably release an unrated version of this, and it'll probably be a better, more complete movie than what we got here. Because this movie just feels gutted. It feels like it's just a husk of a movie that the director and Tom Hardy wanted to make a good movie, and Sony was like, okay, you could get an R-rated Deadpool movie, but then they were like, we kind of want to tie this in Enter Spider-Verse, so we're going to take all this out now. We're just going to take all this out. So, yeah. Is this the worst movie I saw this year? No. I would say the two movies I saw this year that are worse than this are still Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom, which I still have issues with, but I have less issues with after realizing how much of the novels were put in the movie. But it still doesn't say the fact that these human characters are still idiots to these dinosaurs. And Proud Mary is the other movie that basically was just, I really wanted to love that movie. I really did, but that movie was a mess as well. That was a worse mess, and it didn't know what it wanted to be. This movie, you could tell what it wanted to be, but it feels like somebody above the director and the star said, no, we want the movie to be a safe PG-13 movie. So you have this instead. I mean, really, if you just see this movie for $5, it's worth the money. It really is. That's what I saw it for. I saw it for $5, and I don't feel bad for it. I don't really feel bad at all. If it was an IMAX and 3D, okay, I feel a little bit more bad for it. And I honestly wouldn't see it in either or. I mean, it just feels like a $5 movie to watch. Like, the real movie is the unrated version of this. But don't go into this movie thinking it's a complete movie, because it's not. It's a mess. It's a messy movie, but it's still a fun movie. I would just say, if I were ranking, 3 out of 5 alone would probably be the best rating I could give it, because it's still fun enough. But the only reason why I would give it a 3 instead of a 2 is because of the Tom Hardy and the Venom scenes and Michelle Williams' character and the whole interchangeability between all three. And the villain's not as bad of a motivation, but still works because the actor alone saves the villain. Because he pretty much acts his ass off, and basically it works. And I just, again, I look at it more as this movie doing a more of a Wes Craven swamp thing with this. That's basically what this movie does remind me of. It's just basically, it's trying to do its own thing, but it feels gutted in some ways. as that movie was gutted, and I feel like once we get the version we're going to see eventually on Blu-ray, that people will judge this movie much more better than it should be right now. Because honestly, I kind of think this movie's being judged unfairly. I mean, it is a mess. I fully admit it. It's a mess. It's a whole bloated mess. But it was still a fun mess. And if you go into this movie expecting a current superhero movie, you're going to be disappointed. Because you're expecting a hard R Venom movie, and you ain't getting that in this movie. But if you go into this movie expecting a 90s superhero movie, you might have fun with this movie. And that's the best advice I can give you of this. If you go into this having this be a 90s superhero movie, you'll have fun with this movie. I had fun. I have to say, it made me cringe in a few regards, but it still didn't make me want to actively hate it. Other than the fact that the soul just felt gone from this movie. That it was, you saw a movie that was made to be PG-13 when you knew it was really made to be an R-rated movie. That you see that Sony kind of got greedy overtly. And that's pretty much the greatest negative thing against it, that Sony fucked this movie horribly wrong. So yeah, there's my review of Venom. And good night.